Welcome to the 1999 Bus and Coach Wales event at Barry Island. Let's now take a look at some of the entries as they arrive at South Wales' premier seaside resort. Formerly number 147 in the Western Welsh fleet is this 1964 AEC Reliance with Harrington Grenadier coachwork. Also from the Western Welsh stable comes this Park Royal bodied Leyland Tiger Cub of 1966 vintage. Everyone's welcome to come along. Two modern examples from local operator Watts provide a stylish contrast with the preserved entries. Completing a marathon journey from West Wales is this neat little Bristol LHS with ECW body from the fleet of Thomas Brothers Llangadog. The Leyland 400 engine provides ample power for a bus of this size. Unique to the Stagecoach group are these Plaxton-bodied Dennis Javelins, specially fitted out for local express duties. Here's a charming little Trojan 20 personnel carrier which began life with a builder in High Wycombe. Finished in standard Tilling green is this rare surviving example of a Series 1 Bristol VRT with ECW bodywork from the Western National Preservation Group based in Plymouth. A classic from the 1950s, a Weyman Hermes-bodied Leyland Tiger Cub from the old Merthyr Tydfil Corporation, which began life as a Leyland demonstrator. Almost 20 years old, this 11-metre Leyland Leopard with Plaxton Supreme 4 body is still in everyday use with Islwyn Borough Transport based in Blackwood. The classic East Kent Road car double-decker of the mid-60s. A Mark V AEC Regent with front entrance high bridge Park Royal body. Now preserved, this bus spent several years as a driver-trainer in the South Wales Valleys prior to purchase by its present owners. Representing the modern-day first Cymru fleet is this Plaxton Beaver 2 bodied Mercedes Vario, one of 10 similar buses taken into stock and operated out of the Bridgend depot. No Welsh event would be complete without a Cardiff double-decker, and here's a Volvo Ailsa. Cardiff Bus are staunch supporters of this front-engine model. Just listen to that Bedford 466 engine. This twin-steer Bedford Val is a regular visitor to Bus and Coach Wales. Hotly pursuing the Bedford, a Leyland Tiger with Plaxton Viewmaster body, bringing visitors from the Forest of Dean. Typically Merthyr Corporation, here's an East Lancs-bodied Leyland Leopard preserved in the livery of its subsequent owners, Parfits of Rumney Bridge. Western Welsh again, this time a 1965 AEC renown with low height, high bridge, Northern Counties body. This 1974 AEC Reliance has been owned from new by Henleys of Abertillery. Another Reliance from Western Welsh is followed by a Bristol RESL, resplendent in red and white's Tilling red livery. Hot on its heels comes a brown bomber, none other than a Neath & Cardiff AEC Reliance. Listen to the gargling snarl of the Leyland 600 engine on the Edwards exposed radiator PD2 Titan. Another regular attender, it's still licensed for everyday use. Modern coaches next, from Worcester, a Midland Red West Leyland Tiger, and a Stagecoach Volvo B10M used on express services within South Wales. The Bedford YRQ with Plaxton Elite Mark III coach body, the classic choice of many independent coach operators in the 1970s. Yet another Western Welsh vehicle finished in the peacock blue and royal ivory livery, a 1969 Plaxton Elite-bodied Leyland Leopard touring coach. This was number 177 when new. The expansive Gwent-based Phil Anslow company sent this smart Leyland Tiger with Duple's dominant bus body along for a day at the seaside. Another Stagecoach entry, a Dennis Dart with right body, which was one of the first new vehicles for Ron the Buses. Glyn Williams of Cross Keys has been a post-deregulation success story as exemplified by this super low floor Dennis Dart. The sole surviving example of a huge fleet of similar buses, this Longwell green-bodied PD2 Leyland Titan is still with its original owner, Newport Transport. A long-distance entrant, here's a rare surviving example of a low-bridge ECW-bodied Bristol K, reminiscent of the days when Western National buses served Wiltshire. More classic independent coaching. Here's a front-engine Bedford Vam with Plaxton panorama coachwork, a true lightweight of the 1960s. Let's take a wander now around the rally site for a closer look at some of the exhibits. Numerically, the first bus of a batch of 21 identical machines. This one spent its working life based at Red and White's Aberdare depot. Powered by Leyland's 600 engine, these vehicles were excellent performers on a wide range of duties and were extremely popular with staff and passengers alike. These Bristol RESLs put in well over 15 years' service in the South Wales valleys. This ex-London Transport Leyland Titan is something of an unusual choice for this operator, but Gwyn Williams vehicles have always been well turned out, as we can see here. This double-decker has even been fitted out with seatbelts among other passenger-friendly features during refurbishment and prior to entering service with this operator. Faithful performers on Swansea city services in the 1950s and 60s were hordes of these 30-foot Mark V AEC Regents. Pure Tilling, this Lowbridge Bristol KECW combination carries its years well, with contemporary advertising and customary open rear platform. Solid engineering from Brislington. A single-deck counterpart from the same stable. This is the longer Bristol LL model. A popular choice with independent operators, the Bedford Mark has now sadly disappeared. This lovely front-engine Vam survives as a timely reminder of the past British coaching scene. The timeless grace of Wayman's fanfare coach body in SWT livery. In lieu of the customary duple Vista body, this Bedford OB has the less common Plaxton version. Now resident in Cardiganshire, it carries the livery of its present owners, Ken and Delith, a husband and wife team. The sole surviving example of the much-lamented Coity Motors fleet. Based on the outskirts of Bridgend is this beautiful 1960 Leyland Tiger Cub with Birmingham's less common dual-purpose bodywork. Owned by Dilwyn Lewis of Bridgend, just look at the standard of finish and attention to detail on this remarkable restoration. Almost 40 years old and still going strong. Eastern Coachworks bodies were very much the norm on Bristol chassis. Here, however, is Duple's A-type body on a Bristol L from the Southern National Company, complete with cantrail windows and fresh air ventilation to the driver's cab. Although chiefly bought for touring purposes, these coaches often helped out on Royal Blue Express duties. Contrasting views now of the first group's latest offerings, a Dennis Dart SLF and a Northern Counties Palatine double deck. With its destination blind correctly set, here's a Bristol LS6G model, again with ECW body. Once so much a part of the West Country coaching scene, Royal Blue specified outward opening entrance doors for their coaches. The roof-mounted luggage rack was another long-standing Royal Blue feature. No bus rally would be complete without a big red London Routemaster. Close inspection shows that no expense has been spared throughout this mammoth refurbishment. Just look at the high standards achieved on this classic British double-decker. Another fine example from the capital's bus fleet is this neat little Guy Special, a type purchased for lightly trafficked country area services. Feathers in our cap, the old Guy Motors Company motto, proudly adorns this Perkins engined bus. Correctly blinded up for its old stamping ground, here's one of South Wales Transport large intake of Mark V AEC Regents. 11 BWN has Highbridge Willowbrook bodywork.
Thanks then to the Cardiff Transport Preservation Group, and myself to give thanks to the Cardiff Railway Company, known as the Valley Line. This is one of the
SWT were both ardent AEC operators and pioneers in the field of continental coach touring. Roof-mounted air horns were an unusual but no doubt useful feature on coaches of this period. The lavishly appointed interior exudes the quality of coach touring associated with this operator. Take a look at the fashionable seat-top macassars emblazoned with the company name. Enthusiasts' sale stands are an important feature of any bus rally. The Cardiff Transport Preservation Group have done a terrific job in attracting such a wide variety of stallholders to this show. All manner of transport-related items are on sale here. For the serious collector, there's many a bargain to be had among the die-cast model vehicle suppliers. Students of the transport world find the photographic section quite addictive. Even the wife gets roped in for the research.
Yeah, well, I think so.
Yeah, X73.
Right? 73?
X73.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. That's right, you see, David Thorne.
For the children, there's artists' impressions of some of the vehicle entries. These sell for pocket money prices. Excellent value for money.
He hasn't had food today, mate, so you can leave it. No problem at all. You want a telephone number?
All in all, an excellent day is to be had at Barry Island. In fact, a visit to Bus and Coach Wales is just the ticket.
The LSD one was after training tickets. Yeah.
Mike Sutcliffe of Dunstable in Bedfordshire has painstakingly restored this Leyland torpedo charabanc, which was new to the London and North Western Railway in 1914. Soon after delivery, it was requisitioned by the War Department, and upon demob, it became a builder's lorry, was withdrawn some years later, and then languished in an old garage for decades. It was rescued piece by piece through a window and reassembled and restored to its present condition over a considerable period. A preservationist of long standing, Mike has been fortunate enough to obtain the original LNWR company crests. Traditional gold leaf lettering adds a beautiful finishing touch. Solid tyres and acetylene lamps typify motor vehicles of this period. The familiar face of Leyland's post-war PS Tiger range is evident in this view of Southdown number 677. Sporting the traditional two-tone apple green company livery, this is a PS1 model with ECW coach seated body. Red and White was the prominent operator in South East Wales with extensive express coach interests. This 1950 PS1 Tiger would have been a regular performer on such duties, and a Lydney Coachworks body is fitted to HWO 323. As can be seen, the company headquarters were centrally located at Chepstow. Bournemouth's municipal transport always exuded quality. Yet another PS1 Leyland Tiger, this magnificent survivor has full-fronted Birmingham coachwork, complete with semaphore trafficators. Post-war fleet renewal for Bristol included these Leyland PD1 double decks with ECW high-bridge bodies. Bristol city services were largely in the hands of these machines, and similar Bristol K models prior to the introduction of hordes of later low-deckers. The lightweight Bristol SC model proved invaluable to the Hants and Dorset Company. These economical buses were powered by a Gardner 4-cylinder diesel engine.
It's not a very good show, as you know, but I just had the paint job done on the outside of it, and I went and washed it.
The modified rear end overhang aided boarding of the Sandbanks ferry, whatever the prevailing tidal conditions were. The only Bedford OB, still in the hands of its original owner. Leathers of Maiden Bradley in Wiltshire still operate this coach as and when required. It's fully licensed and tested for everyday work. The Atomic Energy Research Establishment ran a number of these fine vehicles. This is a 30-foot Mark V AEC Regent with Park Royal bodywork. Another AEC, this time a thoroughbred Reliance 760 with Alexander Y-type coach body. New to Cambridge-based Premier Travel, this is typical of their vehicle choice in the early 70s. Coaches of 12-metre length like this one were relatively uncommon in those days. Yet another Reliance, although this time a neat 30-footer with AH470 engine from the Maidstone and District Fleet, the distinctive frontal panel treatment being something of a company trademark at the time. These buses heralded the introduction of one-man operation for this operator, another example of a fine restoration. There's plenty of variety at Duxford, with children's rides being provided by this beautifully scaled-down, open-top Southdown Queen Mary.
Thank you.
You're welcome, my dear. Thanks very much for having me. Right, so we all found out when the little lamp gathering is next year. Right.
Showbus justifiably claims to be the major bus and coach rally. Now let's take a brief look around the kaleidoscope of exhibits before we chat with several owners of the preserved bus entries. Sure as the sunrise, the motto of Albion Motors on this fine historic example from the city of Aberdeen.
The vehicle came my way because I had an interest in buses right from my sort of youth or before, and spent all my time walking around the depot and being involved with the fleet that this came from. My father just happened to work for them as well, so it became a hobby and an interest and all-consuming. Perhaps too consuming in the end, but I bought this 31 years ago direct from its owners. It had already, by then, it had done 1.25 million miles in service and was a rather unusual antique to be fit for the road then, but it was built in, as I say, 1936 by Park Royal and AEC. It was constructed in teak, which has a lot to do with the way it's lasted. It has a teak frame bodywork, and it went through 30 odd years of quite vigorous service in the Gosport and Fareham area in Hampshire. It was owned by a company called Provincial, which is a company that has its roots back in the last century, having been formed in the 1870s as a tramways company. And the colour is Gosport and Fareham green, or Provincial green, on the outside. And this colour stayed with the company until it was nationalised in the late 60s, early 70s. But this is a survivor, and it's quite a nice machine to drive, fairly slow, about 30 miles an hour cruising at maximum speed, but a joy to drive and a joy to show to people. I particularly like the fact that people can come aboard, can see it on the road rather than stuck in a museum somewhere. It's quite unusual nowadays to see a pre-1940 vehicle being used and on the roads, certainly a bus, but although this had a hard life, its survival is due to the careful maintenance and efforts of the people at the depot in Howford in Hampshire that looked after it for all those years. And so, this is my bus.
I've had this bus since 1980, and before that it had a very, very checkered career indeed. It was one of 3 experimental buses new to Doncaster Corporation in 1951. They hadn't tried 8 feet wide buses before, they hadn't tried fancy Sidall-Moore seats before, and they hadn't tried the General Manager's patent air exchanger before. But out of the 3, 2 double-deckers, 1 single-decker, the double-deckers were sold out of service quite quickly after only 4 years because they didn't fit the corporation's washing plant down at the depot. And they were then sold to local independent operators, and they operated with them for quite a long time afterwards. This one went to Blue Ensign Coaches, who ran it till 1967, and during that time it was involved in a very drastic accident in which part of the side was torn out, but it was sent back to the original coach builders and repaired, and it stayed in service with Blue Ensign till 1967, was then sold to a Nottingham driving school and spent about 4 years there, no doubt being hammered about by drivers who weren't used to the crash gearbox. Then it was sold for preservation to a Nottingham preservationist who took it to a museum site at Plumtree. He didn't do anything with it, it just languished there for a time, and then was bought in 1974 by a Doncaster group calling themselves the 122 group after the bus's original running number. They didn't do anything with it either, and by the time I got it in 1980 it was thoroughly derelict and needed quite a lot of money spending on it and an awful lot of time. So by 1986 it was in fair fettle again, and since that time it's been rallied in alternate years very, very extensively. It's got an AEC 9.6 litre diesel engine and a crash gearbox. For its time it was quite archaic. I think the manager the Corporation Transport had been running a large number of Daimlers, which, while very fine buses, are notably thirsty. And by the early 1950s, people were beginning to worry about fuel consumption, and so he decided to persuade the Transport Committee to buy buses with crash gearboxes, which, although much more difficult to drive, at least give better fuel consumption figures. And so for its time, it is quite an old-fashioned bus mechanically.
And what's its top speed?
Its top speed is about 45 miles an hour.
And how many was made, do you know?
Just like this, only the one.
Just the one?
Just with the particular details incorporated in the body. But the chassis, I'm not sure just what the total number is, but it's not a particularly large number of this variant of the AEC Regent 3 chassis. Well, Doncaster was a town that was very, very fortunate in that it had both trolleybuses and motor buses. And the trolleybuses made a great deal of money, and also there are certain days in the year in Doncaster when there are race meetings, and on those days the buses ran at a flat fare of 6pence, which was quite dear for the time. So overall, with the very cheap trolleybuses and the fact that the Transport Department got lots of extra fares at certain times of year, they ran their buses very, very cheaply. So you could go quite a long way for threepence, and many routes had a maximum fare of 2pence. Children a penny, adults 2pence.
and this is Northampton Corporation Transport Daimler 154. It's a CVG6 of 1947 vintage that was ordered in 1940 for immediate post-war delivery. Mind you, when it came we got 20 in a batch, so there we are. The bodywork is the more unusual thing about this. It's Northern Coach Builders 56 seat of 1947, of which very, very few examples survive. That's its real claim to fame. It ran with Northampton Corporation Transport from 1947 through to 64, about 625,000 miles in all, and never go more than 3 miles from a town centre. 1964 it was replaced, believe it or not, by another CVG6, and it was used for driver training. The seats came out the bulkhead behind the driver to give access to the cab, and it ran like that until around 1973. Mothballed then for 3 years. It came out in 1976 again, received some mechanical attention, went to a couple of rallies, a bit of driver training, and for publicity for Northampton Corporation Transport, Northampton Transport as it became, with whom it was still running. In 1991, after something like 13 years tucked away in a tin shed, it came to us as 154 Preservation Society, sold on by Northampton Transport, and in those intervening 10 years we've given it full mechanical restoration. That was our initial aim. Full engine rebuild. The bodywork has been dealt with more or less from top to bottom. New floors on both decks. Replacement seats. As it was a driver trainer, it only had one left, so it has a complete set of frames, completely reupholstered, repaint, and one of our stunning glories, the original period Adams Bread adverts on the outside. Paid for, of course, as a commercial enterprise by Adams, who were delighted to see it running around town. That's Northampton Daimler 154, still living these days in the bus depot at Northampton.
With a traditional tiger moth flypast, we say goodbye to Showbus at the Imperial War Museum at Duxford.